those were the really, really big monumental plateaus for me in terms of changing my relationship with that suicidal ideation.
Julian, welcome to the show.
Aaron, thanks to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. My first and most important question is, how are you doing? Like actually, like for real, how are you doing?
Yeah, well, there's always difficulties in life. And I would say that my ability to navigate those is constantly developing and maturing. So right now, I'm doing fantastic, having a wonderful time right now. Thanks for asking.
Absolutely. Yeah, take me back to the time where in your life where handling challenges was challenging. You weren't as good as handling those setbacks as you are now. Can you pinpoint a time in your life where that was the case?
Oh, absolutely. You know, about 10 years ago, I really started to work on the capacity to navigate difficulties and learning how to do it, right? The conceptual, no, hearing the concepts and all the ideas of how to do it, but also learning how to actually practice it and do it are totally different. So it wasn't until maybe 5 years ago where things really started to click, right? I understood all the concepts. I could help people go through it, but I didn't believe that it was for me. So up until maybe yeah, around 5 years ago, 6 years ago, things were very, very challenging for me. And if something big happened in my life, it was something that would really shake me to my core. Around 6 years ago was the time where it started to really start to work out. But do you want like a specific example or something?
Yeah, please. As much detail as you can give about yourself and where you're at in your life at that point.
Yeah, you want me to just start from the beginning and talk about the difficulties or what?
Sure, sure. Let's do it.
Yeah. Well, I was born in Detroit, Michigan. And my dad was 19, my mom was 21, and they came from very different backgrounds. My dad was Mexican and Puerto Rican. Both of his parents immigrated here, and my mom was German. Her mother immigrated here as well after the Second World War. And so the area, super racially segregated and highly racially motivated. My parents hated each other. And so needless to say, they didn't want me. And as they bounced me around back and forth, as I modeled one parent, the one that they hated me for that as well. So I really internalized these beliefs of I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, I'm not deserving. This world is very dangerous and I'm not safe here. And the result of this pain was it resulted in suicidal depression, where from the time that I can first remember having that ideation was probably around 9 or 10 years old. And when I was in my early 20s, the gravity, the weight of this suicidal depression the roots of it had grown into every crevice of my life. It was just at the forefront of my thoughts. It was omnipotent and present, and the weight of it was so great. And when I was 22, maybe 23, I had a near death experience and something clicked there. I really started to try to change the trajectory of my life because it wasn't going to last much longer. It wasn't sustainable. And so I changed almost everything in my life. And I went to university and started studying after a few years of trying to get in there. When I was about 25, I made it back to university and, made it to university, not back there. I wasn't there to begin with. And I was studying addiction medicine and clinical psychology. And I got to say, I wasn't very um, pleased or happy with the results or the ideas that they were communicating to me. So I started finding these teachers through self-study, and I came across psychedelic therapy and teachers that were in addiction medicine that talked about this. And so that was when I first started really understanding trauma and how we adapt to trauma, how it affects us, and how that pain from the past shows up here in the present. So whenever I would go through something difficult, like it could be something trivial like being at work and a manager scolds me or admonishes me for something petty, I would take this as such an existential threat the pain and weight of it was so great because it would bring up the pain from my childhood of I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm not wanted, I'm in danger. And so that was an example of the pain of the past showing up here in the present. And so what I really had to do was learn how to process that pain from the past and really identify those patterns of the adaptations to that pain. And this is what really allowed me to have some agency and responsibility and liberation from that pain in the moment. So when I would go through difficult times, it wouldn't be so overwhelming. It wasn't the end of my life, so to speak.
Yeah. Wow, very powerful story. Thank you for sharing, for one. Um, so I like to start when you were younger and you felt the sense that your parents didn't like each other and didn't like you, like that was a known sense that you had, or was this something that you came across once you started to look at this at a different perspective when you got older, or that was like how you felt when you were a young boy?
Yeah, I knew it from the beginning. Well, as
Mm,
far back as I could tell. My parents were never together.
mm,
It was like a one time, where they came together and then 9 months later I popped out.
mm,
And there was a lot of, using children as legal or relational barter or leverage. And of course, my parents were super young, so they made it very clear that I was not wanted. And it was very clear that they hated each other. I could tell from the way that they talked about each other, despite the fact that they never talked to each other. And maybe it didn't make so much sense when I was younger, why they hated me so much. But then when I got older and I started looking back at like all the racial things that were being said and the dynamics, it was very clear that I was modeling my dad, so my mom hated me, or I was modeling my mom, and so my dad hated me. And this was something I really started to make sense of like in my late 20s, early 30s.
mm. How did that impact your romantic relationships as a young person?
Oh, yeah, that's an interesting question. Yeah, it was really, really strange because, again, the area was super racially motivated. And so when I was at my mom's side, it was an all white neighborhood. They lived in a trailer park outside of Detroit. And then when I was at my dad's side, it was all brown or black. We lived in Southwest Detroit and then in the West Side before he moved to the suburbs as well. And there was this really strange precedence of simultaneously, on my dad's side, wanting to be of this white culture, but also hating this white culture. So I always found myself seeking relationships that would kind of bridge the pain that I was feeling. And I used the relationships in a way unconsciously at the time to kind of soften or soothe the pain that I was in. So as I was totally alone, as I didn't have any secure relationships, um, I would use relationships like intimate romantic relationships with people to fill that gap of not having anybody else there. It put tremendous weight and stress on my relationships. And of course, when I'm out there looking for love from a romantic partner, and my idea of love is what I'm confusing the relationship I had with my parents for. So what love looks like to me is conflict. It looks like abandonment. It looks like betrayal. It looks like abuse. And so I'm looking for love that I didn't get from my parents from people now as an adult who also can't give it to me. So I'm mirroring the same relationships that I had as a kid. It was very, very stressful, very challenging, and caused a lot of problems for me early in my life.
Very interesting. Are you currently in a relationship?
I am, yes.
And how is that different, or how are you different? How did you enter that relationship differently than, say, all of your previous ones?
hmm This relationship, the baseline of self worth, of self knowledge, of knowing my patterns and the pains that I carry around was very different because I had gotten to a place where I was comfortable being alone. In fact, I was very happy to be alone. I had worked through enough of the pain that I carried in myself that I really enjoyed my own company, and I didn't need a relationship to fulfill that void that I had or that pain that I carried around. So the stress or the pressure of finding the love that I didn't get from my parents in a new partner wasn't there anymore. That was something that I was absolutely able to process and soothe. And so this relationship, of course, functions a lot more healthily than the last ones that I had did.
Yeah, I think that's what all these fucking rom-coms have gotten wrong, right? The messaging right
Mhm.
forever was like, you complete me, like all that shit. And it's like, it's not true, right?
Yeah.
Like there's also a messaging on the other side that you have to be completely healed, perfect to enter into a relationship. That's also untrue because I don't think people are quote unquote completely healed. Like life happens every day. Shit happens every day. Like you might see something down the street that's like, holy shit, that's a car accident and that could traumatize you. Do you have to like jump out of your relationship because you're not fully healed and then jump back? Like all of that stuff is like doesn't make any sense. But like you're saying though, if you're if you are getting more comfortable with yourself and you value and appreciate yourself, I don't know you have to love yourself completely. That's very challenging, but you do have to value yourself, know your capabilities, and know your worth. Then, once you enter a romantic relationship, you're not seeing that person or partner as a completion of yourself. You're fully entering that relationship. They're just adding so much benefit and joy to your life that you together can flourish as one. But you're each two individual people. And I think that was something I had to realize too, because I just recently got married and that was just never something that connected with me. Like my wife is a full-fledged beautiful woman, like amazing. She doesn't need me per se, she needs me to do a few things, but the value is that she wants me around, and that's a cool fucking feeling to have, that she wants me around, she wants me to help her and protect her, whatever the case may be. Like that stuff is really what makes a man feel, at least in my estimation, feel useful. But I think the messaging has been very skewed in at least the rom-com, Hollywood department. But that's where a lot of people get their information about what a romantic relationship should be. Like nobody's falling in love in 2 hours. Like this is not how it's working. But anyways, any thoughts on my little rant there, Julian?
No, precisely, Aaron. Yeah, there's so much messaging out there of I'm broken and I need somebody to fix me. And, the way that it works is when we're growing up, the relationship that we develop with our parents is what the pinnacle or the model of connection and love looks like, or lack thereof. So if we had fundamental needs growing up with our parents that went unfulfilled, right? If they weren't able to meet our needs the way that we needed them to, unconsciously we look for people to fill those needs later in life. And that's where we get into this really strange role reversal. Like if we had to care for our parents, so we look for a partner to care for us, right? We marry our triggers. We always find the person who's not going to be able to meet our needs in the way that we need them to be met because we mistake love, compassion, connection for whatever way it looked when we were kids where our needs weren't met. In our society, I mean, there's lots of forces out there that are pushing us towards disconnection or to disease or lots of ways that are hurting us. And yeah, you're absolutely right, Aaron. That is one way right there that is really harming people.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Okay, also let's go back because it's very important. You mentioned some suicidal ideation, some really dark depression, some dark moments. That's an important piece for me, and I can share a personal story in a bit. But how did you keep moving forward in those very dark, very bleak moments where maybe nothing looked like it was on the horizon for you, or you didn't see a future for yourself, or maybe you didn't want a future for yourself? What was the thought process there, and how did you, grow into this human being that you are right now?
Yeah, that's a difficult question. The short answer, how did I get through it, is I had two fantastic dogs
Mm,
that, I saw a lot of myself inside these two dogs. And I really wanted to show up for them in ways that nobody ever showed up for me.
mm,
And so it seemed very difficult for me. That was one of the things that kept me holding on. And I think that was just enough to keep me holding on while I learned how to recognize or identify the pain that I was carrying around, especially the pain from the past. So you and I could be sitting here right now and 10, 15 years ago, and I might be super anxious, or I might get really angry. I might perceive something as a threat. I might just have overwhelming sadness or a sense that you're judging me or you don't like me. None of that might be true other than what I'm feeling, but that's not something that's grounded with what's happening now. That would be the pain from the past. So once I really learned how to recognize that pain from the past and accept that it's here rather than fighting it and trying to push it away, saying, no, I don't like that, and trying to exile it, just like I was exiled when I was a kid. Once I learned how to accept that it's here and to relate with the pain and try to understand why it's here, what purpose does it serve? What teaching does it have? What does it want from me right now? What do I need to do to comfort or soothe this pain? And then, of course, developing a practice where I do comfort and soothe that pain. Those were the really, really big monumental plateaus for me in terms of changing my relationship with that suicidal ideation. The more I could do that, when it would show up, which at some points in my life it was always present. And the more and more I worked with it, the less present it became. But when it would show up, once I had that foundation in place, it didn't have so much power over me. It wasn't so overwhelming. Instead of it being this very big monster that was threatening my existence, it was a familiar old friend, somebody who's been with me since the very beginning, who's carrying a message of something that needs to happen right now. And once I could really listen to that and do those things, my relationship with that suicidal depression changed.
Mm. Well, I am very glad that that happened and very glad that you're still here with us. So,
Thank you. Yeah, it's not always the case, right?
yeah.
Um, and each one of those can be a very powerful teacher and an incredible lesson. And we can learn from that and then use those skills and tools and messages to work and help with other people who are going through it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a prime example of that. Um my sister ended her own life in 2018, and I never thought that I would have this type of conversation, or this type of conversation would interest me. And it's very cool to know that my life has gotten to this point. But I have like a really weird relationship with the word gratitude, because in one sense, I'm obviously not grateful that my sister is not here. But in the other same token, on the other side of it, I'm very grateful for my life right now with my wife and child on the way and a beautiful family and like all these blessings that I have. And so I have a weird relationship with that word, um, because I would give it all up for another half second with my sister, listening to her favorite song or going to a Marvel movie or Comic Con that she liked to go to or whatever the case may be. But it is very, very powerful what you can learn from our darkest moments. And it's a huge thing for human beings. But I also think at the same time that we could talk about these things all day, but until someone experiences something like that, they're not truly going to realize those lessons. And good thing is that everyone's going to go through some sort of pain or hardship or trauma. So we don't really have to, we can count on that happening. Maybe that's not such a good thing. Hopefully the world can be less suffering. I don't think we're going to end it, but there is that power in that. And so I think the conversation of this, or any type of conversation like this, is sort of like a, what is it, like a reference point for someone potentially who might also be experiencing something that you went through, or something that I went through, or something not even similar, but the resulting emotion was similar, of great grief or pain or loss or desperation or whatever the case may be. And so I think it can be very powerful. And at least I'm an example of that, trying to do the best I can.
Yeah, I hear you, Aaron. Yeah, suffering, loss, pain, these are inherent natures of our reality. There's no life that you can live that would be free of pain or loss. As far as I know, every person that's born in this world is going to die. And when that person dies, people are
Julian, are
going
you
to,
sure about that? You sure about that?
I can't say 100% for certain that that is always the case. I have heard cases of, people through the ages who can obtain, and live whatever, but there's going to be pain and loss. And so we don't want to take that away. We don't want to cut ourselves off from that. Instead, we want to learn how to navigate that and how to function through those times. And so when you say, like, I have this weird relationship with gratitude, I have so much that I'm grateful for. And on the other hand, it sounds like there's still pain and anger from what happened to your sister or happened with your sister. So what you're describing here is a form of emotional complexity where yes, you can be happy and you can be grateful and you can be sad and angry all at the exact same time. It doesn't have to be one or the other, and the one that's here doesn't have to dominate everything. All of these emotions can, and most of the times, are present at the exact same time. So when we learn how to recognize and identify them and express them and process them and comfort and soothe them, the control that these emotions have over us is much less. And of course, you're totally justified and right to be sad and to be angry and to be scared when something like that happens. Those dynamics are very, very powerful and they stick with us for a very long time. So you're absolutely right to feel those emotions. There's nothing wrong with that. And we can make space for that and express them in constructive ways.
Yeah, 100%. Very powerful. Um, Also, I had another question. Well, I guess that's the whole point of this is to ask you some questions, but but anyways, anyway, we're having a good time. So tell me why you found sort of the formal psychology education maybe not as useful as you'd imagined, or what was that like for you?
Mhm. It wasn't consistent with my lived experiences.
Mhm.
So the academic realm is, in my opinion and from my experience, very removed from the real world. They talk about these studies and all these things, and we can learn tremendous amounts of things, and a lot of them are very, very valuable. But life doesn't exist in a vacuum. And when we're doing these studies in these air conditioned rooms or in these laboratories, it's very different from what's happening on the streets with people who are struggling. So when I was trying to figure out how to work with addictions, for instance, because my brother was heavily addicted, and as far as I know, still is, to very, very heavy substances. And he was from a very, very early age. And as were a lot of people in my family and a lot of people in my community, the amount of people that died from suicide and overdose by the time I was 22 is a weight that no study ever could touch and no professor could ever really understand. So when they're talking about addictions and they're saying, it's this complex mechanism of environment and genetics, and it's a mix of making choice and bad behavior. I was saying, You've never been there. Those answers weren't consistent with anything that I was really experiencing. And it was through independent study where I found some incredible teachers in the addiction world that were using the medical literature that exists that talks about addictions in a completely different framework that frames the addiction as an adaptation to pain. And once I saw that and I saw these approaches of looking at trauma, pain, and various adaptations like addictions or even depression, anxiety as a form of adaptation to an environment, rather than being a victim at the whim of some genetic disease or this brain disease that I actually have a lot of power here. I can actively engage with this, just like with when I was working through my suicidal depression, rather than seeing it as a disease that was imposed on me or something that I was just unlucky for contracting. I had a lot of power here. Rather than being a victim, had the ability to navigate it. And so I found that approach a lot more useful for what I was trying to do, which was help people through very, very difficult times like depression and addictions, for instance.
Do you believe that the labels, like an addict, for example, right? They go to a meeting, they say, I'm an addict.
Mhm.
Do you think something like that is actually helpful? Because when I think about it in sort of a specific mental health space, I am depressed. I am anxious. That's no good. That means you're wrapping your whole identity in this scarf of depression or this scarf of anxiety, and you're not anything else. No, you might be feeling some depression. You might be experiencing depression. You might be feeling some anxiety or anxiousness or nervousness, but that's not your whole being. And so I think it's very limiting for us as human beings and how complex and diverse we are. Do you feel the same way about that for addiction? I've never been in those meetings, so I'm just sort of asking a question, but just your take on that.
Yeah, I really do agree with you there, Aaron. First thing, we have to be very, very careful of the stories that we tell ourselves. These narratives, these words that we speak into existence. Um, was it Bruce Lee who said this? And I'm going to paraphrase this quote, but I think he said, we have to be very careful of what we say to ourselves because our bodies don't know the difference between joking and being serious. So when I say I'm an addict, when I say I'm depressed, I'm speaking that into existence. It might not be the case right now, but I'm creating that. So this is very powerful and we want to be very careful about it. I don't necessarily find the label of saying I'm an addict or I'm depressed very useful. The label just describes a set of symptoms or behaviors or circumstances that I'm experiencing at that time or throughout my life. What I'm far more interested in is knowing what is the addiction? What purpose does it serve? Why is it here? What needs is it trying to meet? And how can I meet those needs in other healthy or constructive ways? If we're talking about a depression, for instance, what does it mean to be depressed? When I ask 10 people, what does depression mean to you? I will get 10 different answers. But when I really start asking questions and distilling down what they're experiencing, it's almost always the exact same thing. The label itself takes us away from the experience, is what I find.
Yeah. I love the word adaptive. I was looking at because I everything I think about is like through a sports lens, Julian. So
Mm-hmm.
just beware. I haven't mentioned that in 30 minutes, which is shocking. I've never done that in a whole episode before in my life. But I was looking at this term today called adaptive consistency. And it's like there's dangers to consistency, right? If you're doing the same thing over and over and over again, you're showing up every day, but you're putting in the right inputs, but you're not getting the right outcomes, then it's your consistency is almost as bad as being inconsistent because you haven't adapted to the changes that you make and that you need to make. And so the right inputs could lead to the right outcomes. And then you have this idea called adaptive consistency, which is very similar to what you're trying to say is like, we have to figure out what the adaptation is as to why we made that choice to drink that first time or gamble the first time or have sex for the first time, and then it snowballed out because I needed to feel seen or safe or loved or valued, and this is the thing that helped me, or I needed to not get in the way so I wouldn't get abused or hurt or hit or whatever the case may be. That's the adaptation. And then what's it led to now where your life is maybe in shambles or you're not feeling well or you have serious suicidal ideation. Then okay, then you can get to the root and sort of figure out there, then you can move forward with it. I don't know if that comparison is really good, but it was on the top of my brain today and you kept saying adaptive, and so that just popped up, so I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah, yeah. You framed it very well, Aaron, which is, yeah, what does the adaptation do for us? Right? Does it make me feel loved, seen? Does it give me connections? Does it numb my emotions? So on and so forth. Does it give me a relationship with somebody that I might not have had otherwise? And then the question becomes, well, why don't I have those things already? Right? Why am I in pain and I don't know what to do with it? Why do I not feel loved, valued, or respected unless I do this thing? And that almost always goes back to childhood. When we're developing as kids, our emotional circuits are developing, our nervous system is developing, our brain, everything is developing exponentially, and it develops in relationship to our environment. And we have very limited ways of dealing with pain and difficulties in that environment, especially when we don't have somebody there to help us go through it. Now, we might have parents who are very loving, for instance, and very caring, but what happens if they're getting modern medicine advice that says don't hold your kids when they cry? And so this baby's crying out to be soothed and to be comforted, which is essential to their survival, and they're not getting their needs that are essential to their survival. What's the message to the baby there? My needs don't matter. I'm not important. I'm not valued. In other words, I'm not safe. And so this baby has to adapt to that pain in a certain way. And there's only a couple ways that they can do it. As kids, we can set boundaries. We can say, the way I'm being treated isn't working. Please don't treat me this way. But most kids don't know that they have that ability. And if we do, I mean, you mentioned I make myself small so I don't get beat. If there's abuse or trauma that's happening, a lot of the times expressing the boundary will cause us to be in greater danger. So setting boundaries is usually out the window. The second option is we can go away. We can leave the difficulty of what's causing us the pain, but as kids, we're hopelessly dependent on our parents. Humans are the most immature, undeveloped, dependent species for the longest amount of time that we can identify in this world. It takes a human 3, 4 years to learn how to run. It takes a horse 1 day to learn how to run. So we have to have these nurturing connections, so we can't leave. But what happens if we're going through chronic pain? It keeps happening. We have abuse in our families. We have negligence. Our needs aren't being met. Our parents are present. They're loving. They're caring, but they're too stressed with finances and jobs and works and all the things that are happening around us. What do we do with that pain? Well, we can't set boundaries. We can't go away physically, so we go away mentally. We start to disconnect from our emotions. We start to disconnect from the feelings in our body. We disconnect from our boundaries. We don't express the things that we're feeling. These are all adaptations. And so the way that we commonly do that is we distract from the feelings that we have, from the signals in our body that are saying, I'm in danger, I have needs, whatever it is. And as the distractions become acclimated or the emotion gets more and more powerful, we need bigger and bigger distractions. We need more and more and more to take us away from it. And that's where the addiction comes in. Whenever I ask somebody, what does the addiction do for you? I know what it does wrong for you. They'll tell me like that. Oh, I lost my family. I lost my relationships. I lost my job. I lost my health. What worked so well that you were willing to lose those things? And a
Yeah.
lot of the times it took away the pain. It gave me a sense of being loved, a sense of comfort, even if it was just for a moment. And then, of course, the addiction is any behavior that helps you in the short term, provides short term relief, but has long term consequences. So you can't give it up despite those consequences. And then we see those long term consequences coming in. So we can see almost everything, whether it's the depression, the anxiety, the beliefs of unworthiness, I'm not good enough, I'm defective. All of these are adaptations to a pain that we were feeling at some point in our life that we didn't know how to navigate.
Mm. Very interesting. Very interesting. And then on top of that, in the same sort of realm, people always say, I'm a recovering addict or I'm a recovering alcoholic. Do you think that's also good phrasing, or you think people can fully recover and cure themselves and then, blossom into like the person that they've always knew they could be if they didn't have to go through this adaptation or thing that, probably kept them alive for some time and now potentially is killing them?
So we got two words there that are very important: recovery and cure. Let's start with cure. I would like to be very careful about the word cure here. Cure means the thing that I was dealing with is gone.
Mm,
It's totally removed. That doesn't happen. So there is some wisdom and truth in saying I'm an addict, I'm an alcoholic, because that pattern, that adaptation never goes away. It's
mm,
always going to be present, but our ability to work with it can change. So when we develop agency, choice making, responsibility, and we cultivate and develop skills and tools to navigate the pain that's underlying the addiction, then we can heal the addiction. So there's a big differentiation between cure and heal. Cure and heal. Cure is it's gone. Healing is I can work with it and it doesn't
Mm,
have so much power over me anymore. It's still a part of me, it's still in my life, and it doesn't control me. So that's very important. The first word that you used was recover. What does it mean to recover something? If I recover my phone after I've lost it, it means I found it, right? If I recover my car keys, that means I found them after I've lost it. So when somebody's healing from an addiction, what is it that they're recovering? Well, it's exactly what you just said. It's who I was before all this pain happened and I had to adapt to it. So, what we recover is ourselves. When somebody's healing from an addiction, they recover themselves. They recover their emotions. They recover their boundaries. There's an innate wisdom inside of everybody that knows how to heal. Healing is a fundamental dynamic of the world that we live in our reality. We can see it everywhere we look. If a tree loses a limb, it will heal, it will scar over. If we get a wound, we will heal, it will scar over. And a scar can become very stiff and rigid and hard and numb. But if we take a lot of time to care for it and we stretch and we exercise, that scar, that wound can become more flexible and it can regain a lot of its softness and its feeling as well. And that's exactly what happens when people are in recovery. They're recovering who they were before the wounds and they reconnect with that innate ability to heal. So the word recovery, I think, is very important here and
mm.
very useful.
Thank you for making that distinction and explanation. Okay, let's jump to psychedelics. Actually, obviously you're an expert in that as well. What was your first psychedelic experience, and was that first experience very transformative for you?
Mm. Yeah, so I had been studying psychedelic therapy for about 7 or 8 years at this point, reviewed all the literature, listened to numerous people talk about it. Um, and I quickly learned that there's a very big difference between knowing something conceptually and experiencing something. Again, going back to my experiences in the university. So the first time I started having induced psychedelic experiences with like a psychedelic substance. See, the word psychedelic, its meaning is broken into two parts. There's psyche and delic. Psyche is all of the immaterial aspects of who we are. So it might be construed as the soul or your mind, the way that you think, your perceptions, your emotions, your feelings, all these things that are not physical, tangible, but exist and construct who we are as individuals. Psychology. So it's this psyche, the soul of who we are. And then delic is manifesting or emerging. So when we put these two together, you have a very deep connection to yourself. And this experience can be induced through so many ways: meditation, sensory deprivation, fasting, isolation. You can go to the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights and you'll hear the voice of God in isolation. You can go deep into a cave and experience an incredible psychedelic experience. You can do a sun dance and push yourself to the brink of dehydration and exhaustion and have an incredible experience throughout the whole thing. The friars in the Catholic Church used to use mutilation in some ways, flagellation to induce pain and have a psychedelic experience. So there's so many ways you can get there, and I had been practicing it all along through like meditation and reflection. But the first time I worked with a psychedelic substance, I took a very, very low dose, and it was incredible. It was so beautiful and so profound. And so I did it again a couple weeks later, and this one started to get a little bit more dicey. I
Mm.
started seeing a lot of things that were very uncomfortable and things I didn't want to see. It was the pain that I was carrying around. And I started to again become acutely aware of just how chronically suicidally depressed I was at this time. So then I took a very, very large dose. And, you know, I knew what I was doing wasn't a great idea, like most people do, but I still did it. And, you know, it was incredibly traumatizing for me because one of the main characteristics of a psychedelic experience is you connect deeply to yourself. You see all the things that are inside of you that you have been avoiding, that you've been repressing or depressing or exiling and pushing away. All that pain that was inside of me that I didn't want to face, that I didn't have the ability to face, all came rushing up to the surface, and I did not have the ability to navigate it. So things got very, very challenging for me for about 6 months at that time, and that really sparked me to really try to figure out how can, because there was a lot that was beneficial there as well. The connection, the awareness that I had of all the things that were in there, incredible. It was just I didn't know what to do with the things that I found. So that really catalyzed my desire to figure out how do we get into this space? How can we really work with those things that are inside of us that are coming up to the surface? And how can we make it easier on ourselves and ideally therapeutic and healing at the same time?
Mhm. Yeah, I had a similar experience as you. My first trip was like beautiful, so nice. I was out in nature with a buddy of mine, and we did it together. And it just felt like everything was alive. You could see things so vividly. You had a bird's eye view of myself, just like enjoying things. Just a nice, easy, really beautiful trip. My second trip was fucking torture. So very similar to you. But then after that, I had a realization, maybe you're similar as well, that there's no such thing as like quote unquote bad trip. You need that. Oh, I needed that experience because it was very soon after my sister passed, and I had to understand some things that I was trying to avoid or brush under the rug or yada 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 yada. And so I'm under the impression that if you go on a sort of trip like this, where it's the things are safe and you're okay, and things are like the setting is good and all of that stuff is all right. That whatever you're shown, I think, is supposed to be shown, and so there's really no quote unquote bad trip. Do you feel the same way?
To an extent, yeah, I really agree with you there. Um, I would define a bad trip as something is coming up for you during the experience, which is the point of the psychedelic experience, is to connect with what's inside of you, to have these things come to your awareness. So something's coming up, and spoiler alert, it's almost always some amount of pain, some constriction, some pattern, some belief about ourselves, guilt. I did the wrong thing at this place. I'm a bad person, which would be like a big shame or pain of loss that I haven't been able to work through or process yet, anger towards myself or towards others. All of these things are starting to come to the surface. That's what the psychedelic experience does. And the bad trip is when we say, no, I don't
Mm,
want that. Go away, push it away. So if our pattern is to push the pain away or avoid it, exile it, distract to get away from it. When you have a psychedelic experience, you're going to be in that state for hours and you're going to need to face it. So if we don't have the capacity to really work with the things that are coming up, yeah, we're going to have a very difficult, challenging, stressful time. And our ability to engage with it, to listen to it and participate in the experience and see why this thing is coming up, what the message is, what the teaching is, and what we can do with it is greatly reduced. In fact, most times it's non existent because we're just
mm,
trying to get away from it.
mm,
That's a very, very difficult time. And, bad's a judgment, it's an assessment. And
right.
a lot of people, and myself included in the past, would call that a very bad time. So, what we really want to learn how to do is take that inventory that the psychedelic experience is going to do for us, all the things that are going to come up beforehand. We need to prepare and we need to take that inventory and figure out what's the pain that we're carrying around? What's our relationship with it? What do we do with our pain? What do we do with our anger? What do we do with our shame? What are our core beliefs about ourselves? In other words, what our internal state, our internal world, what's the weather like there? Is it calm? Is it peaceful? Is it a nice, beautiful tropical beach? Or is it a hurricane? Is there a tempest happening? What do we do? How do we engage with it? And we want to build the capacity long before a psychedelic experience to really work with all of those things that are there, whatever they are. So if we can get to that point where we're able to really work with our emotions and our pain and our beliefs about ourselves. When we have a psychedelic experience, we use it as a specific tool to go directly into that pain rather than trying to avoid it. And when we can do that, and we get very familiar with that pain beforehand, just like I was saying earlier, when we go into that space and then that pain comes up, rather than it being a terrifying, big, scary monster that we want to run away from that's overwhelming us, it's a familiar friend. It's here for a reason. It has a message that it's trying to communicate. It might present as overwhelming and scary and something that we want to avoid, but it's an internal experience. It's not something that's really going to harm us. So rather than running away from it, can we turn into it? Can we ask questions about it? Can we sit down and have a dialogue and try and build a relationship and learn from this? Can we ask, what are you trying to teach me? And when we can do those things, that bad experience that was there of avoiding this, it transforms like that. And that big scary monster usually turns into a younger version of ourselves, a very childish version that's carrying around a lot of pain and doesn't know what to do with it. And it's acting like it's throwing a tantrum. And so we want to send it to its room and exile it until it can regulate. But instead we can just bring it in and let's say, hey, what are you carrying around and how can we comfort it? When we do that, everything transforms.
Yeah, beautiful. Um, how do you think about the word trauma? It's part of your work, but how do you think about specifically that word as it relates to all of us human beings walking around
You said trauma?
trauma?
Yeah. Trauma in our age in this world is, in my opinion, unavoidable. Um, I would define trauma as bad things that happen that shouldn't. So, the loss of a sibling, for instance. Or it could be good things that are supposed to happen that don't happen.
Mm,
So you have loving parents. They're really well meaning. They're trying their best. But again, they're getting bad information from their doctors that are saying, punish your kid when they're expressing their emotions until they regulate. Um, these are the things that happen. And that in itself is not enough for it to become traumatic. What has to happen is a change, a constriction, some sort of limiting of my ability, my range of motion, my flexibility, my ability to live life, my ability to express emotions, to have emotions, for instance, my behavior, my perception of how the world works becomes limited. And I become constricted because of this traumatic event. That's when it becomes trauma. So if I have loving parents and they care for me, and but they're not present, that's the thing that happens. That's not the trauma. The trauma is what happens inside of me. I don't have anybody to talk to. I learn to suppress my emotions. I develop the belief I'm not good enough. I'm unworthy. I have to prove myself or earn my right to get love or compassion. That's the trauma. And every single person that I've ever worked with and have met for that purpose, for that matter, is carrying around some amount of that trauma, and it comes out in unconscious ways and we continue to act it out. So it's definitely something in our age, in our generation, in our world right now that we really want to become aware of and start to reclaim some agency and responsibility with.
mm. And what kind of tools and practices are you trying to equip your clients with as you start working with them and getting more familiar with them? I know this is hard because the people you work with is specific to them and their situation and their story. But if you could, generalize it a little bit for potentially people to potentially put into their practice or their toolkit if
Mhm.
they're, watching or listening.
Yeah. The first thing we want to do is we want to start to build awareness. We want to recognize the patterns of trauma, the pain from the past, and how we adapted to it. And we want to recognize and identify when that pain from the past is showing up here now in the present. And then we want to look at what do we do with that? Do we like it? Do we avoid it? Do we hate it? Do we fight it? Do we welcome it? Do we embrace it? What do we do? Most of the times, we try to get rid of it. And so rather than doing that, we want to learn to accept it. And then we want to get very curious about it. I want to start to ask questions about why is it here? What purpose does it serve? When did I first start feeling this? How often do I feel it? Is it here now? Is it here every day? Is it all throughout the day? Is it once a week? How far back does it go? A year? 5 years? Does it go all the way back to the very beginning of my life? Most times it does. And what were the unmet needs that I had that went unfulfilled? And can I meet those now? And that's the last step, which is nurturing ourselves. How can we
Mm,
meet those needs in healthy, constructive ways? So here's an example. When we go through something that's traumatic as kids, the overwhelming majority of the time, like I was saying earlier, we disconnect from ourselves. That's the trauma right there. That's probably the biggest trauma, is a disconnection from ourselves. And what that looks like is we suppress or depress our emotions. So when I talk to somebody who has depression, for instance, and I ask them, what does that mean to you? It always comes out that they are literally, by definition, the word depression means to bury something. If I depress power lines, I bury them underground and I take away its energy. So it's like holding a beach ball underwater. That would be depression. It requires a tremendous amount of energy to push it under the water, and it comes bursting right back up to the surface. So then I ask, well, what is it that you're depressing? Not directly, but that's what we're going to try and figure out. And almost always, it's emotions. It's my anger. It's my fear. It's my sadness. It's shame. It's even my joy, because we can't just depress or suppress one of these emotions. It's all of them. And so, what the trauma is that early in our lives, we had big emotions. We might have been very angry that our parents weren't meeting our needs. We might have been very scared about that. And expressing them might have put us in greater danger, or it might have deepened the divide between us and our parents. So if our parents are stressed, for instance, with work, and they come home and they're very irritable, I can't have needs because they already have enough to deal with. I need to be small, agreeable. I become a people pleaser. I try to make them as happy as possible. I tend to their emotional needs. So there's a role reversal. So what we want to learn how to do here is to recognize or identify our emotions, to notice, when is anger present? What does it feel like in the body? What are the signs or signals in the body? Does my body temperature increase? Does my heart rate increase? Does my breathing get labored? Do my muscles get contracted? And what do I do with that? And then most of the times we'll find, oh, okay, I suppress that. So we want to start to build the ability to recognize, identify anger's present. Rather than suppressing it, we're going to make a choice now. I'm going to accept I'm angry. Something happened. Something's going on right now that is making me angry. What's happening that's making me angry? Not specifically the thing that's going on. Oh, you're looking at me this way. Or, oh, Aaron, we said we were going to talk at this time. This didn't happen. I'm making this up. You said we were going to talk at this time, and you didn't show up. And that made me angry. Of course, we're here on time. Everything's great. So that's not the case. But that's the thing that happened. What we want to know is, why does that make me angry? Why would somebody not showing up on time to a meeting make me angry? Well, because you don't value my time. You don't value or respect me. Ah, you see, we just identified the core belief. I'm not respectable. I'm not valued. I'm not important. This person doesn't value me. And that goes all the way back to childhood, because my
yeah.
parents weren't present. So then we want to say, what were my needs? So I needed to be valued. I needed to be respected. Can I meet those needs myself?
Mm,
Can I do something with this anger that I'm feeling? Can I comfort it? Can I value it? Can I respect it? Can I listen to it? Can I soothe it in some way? And then the practice is just doing that. And we can do it, of course, in real time as it comes up, but that takes a lot of practice, a lot of building up to, because a lot of the times it happens so quick, the emotion just comes up, and our adaptation of suppressing it also comes up very quickly, and we don't see it. So what we want to do is we want to start to cultivate time. We want to carve out time for ourselves where we turn into that pain that we're carrying, to those emotions that we're carrying, where we say, I'm good enough, I'm deserving, I'm important enough to give myself time to pay attention to this anger that I feel, or this pain that I feel. And I'm going to sit here with it for 5 minutes, 3 times a day. or 10 minutes or 15 minutes 3 times a day. And I'm going to sit with it and listen to it and try to understand it and also try to be a comforting, soothing presence for it. The more and more I do that, where I build this relationship with myself, where I reconnect with myself and I meet my needs, the easier it is to do it in real time. And the more that I do that, of course, through practice and in real time, the less things out there have control over me. So if you show up late for a meeting, again, you didn't do that, but if you did hypothetically, rather than seeing it as a direct attack to myself because I'm not good enough or I'm not respected, hey, maybe Aaron's just running late, or maybe something's going on with Aaron. Maybe something happened. I sure hope he's okay. I hope everything's going on. See, instead of anger being the thing that's going to control the situation, now I have compassion and understanding. So we can really transform the pattern of trauma into something that's more in line with who we are as individuals.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's like it seems like you're trying to build that, self-trust where people can actually listen and trust their intuition because I think once you get to a certain point, the self-deception is the only thing that can maybe keep you alive or keep you around. So you're not really sure what's true, what's not true. And so when you start to do, this like self-inquiry, how hard is it for people to actually get honest with themselves? Is that a challenging roadblock for people to conquer in your experience?
Depends on the therapist they have.
Yeah, fair enough.
There are a lot of therapists, and I've had them, who will validate and reaffirm that negative self talk.
Mhm.
And they don't do it intentionally. It's just that's what their training was. So you'll go round and round and round and you say, oh, of course I don't trust myself. That's the right thing to do. I'm not trustworthy. And round we go. But if you're working with somebody who has the ability to ask questions and to challenge those beliefs, right? And to get very curious about them with you and say, where did you learn not to trust yourself? Where did you learn that you weren't trustworthy or reliable? What was happening when you learned that? Where did you get that message from? Who taught you that? Um, if we can really get curious about it and push back on those narratives and see them as learned responses or adaptations to something that happened, we can really regain our autonomy. And that can happen in minutes. Like I've seen people in 5 minutes of asking these questions start to say, oh my gosh, that is a pattern I developed so early on. Yes, of course I developed that. And then once they see it, then they can start to build their relationship with them. So it can happen very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, questions are so powerful. I teach basically my athletes the exact same thing. Like, we're never going to eliminate negative self talk, especially on a sports field, right? Things happen, whatever. So maybe you start to have those negative thoughts. And I tell them, just like you stated there, don't try to eliminate it, challenge it by simply asking it a question. Is this thought helpful in this moment? No, you saying that you're the worst player in the whole fucking universe is not helpful in this moment. Maybe you saying something else to challenge that thought is like, okay, I prepared for this moment. I'm ready.
Yeah.
Great. That's a great challenge. You asked a simple question, and now we can move forward with a more optimistic mindset. It sounds like you're doing the same thing, obviously at a much deeper, more profound level with something that's much more serious than obviously a sports event or game.
Yeah. I mean, we don't have to judge it or assess it, right? Um, but one way that we can do it, what I do here is I want to find out whose voice is that.
Mm,
Because there's a voice that's yipping in my ears saying I'm the worst player in the world or I'm not good enough or so on. Whose voice is that? Where did I learn that narrative? Where did I learn that voice? It's very easy to mistake it as my own voice, but if I'm listening to it, how is that my voice? Um, yeah, that's a very common thing right there, is that thing, that voice is always present. And if we can identify where it comes from, where we learned it, and whose voice that was, it might be society's voice, it might be my dad's voice, it might be my uncle's voice, it might be a teacher's voice, right? Then we can say, hi dad, I don't need that right now. Or we can even get more curious about it on our own time and say, what was my dad trying to teach me by doing that? Right?
mm,
When he was critiquing me, evaluating me, being harsh on me, what was he really trying to do? Oh, he was trying to make me into the best player that I could have been. So this is actually a form of compassion, misdirected, not helpful by any means. It has the opposite effect of what he's trying to do, but it came from a place of caring. It came from good intentions. So when I hear that voice come up and I say, there's my dad's voice again. Hi, Dad. I see you're trying to help me, but it's really not helpful right now. Please take a seat. I'll be with you in a minute. And it'll allow us to come back to ourselves rather than getting wrapped up in this voice that's kind of controlling us in that sense.
Yeah. Yeah, beautiful. Well, yeah. Thanks, Julian, man. That was awesome. Is there anything that I didn't ask you or that I missed that you want to touch on, before we wrap up?
I mean, it was a fun conversation. I really, really enjoyed talking with you. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about before we part ways that we
No,
didn't get
man.
to?
Um, no, I think that's good. I mean, there's some more questions I wanted to ask you about what somatic work is and meditation and stuff like that, but I think we can have another chat at another time. We're not going anywhere. I think we gave people enough good information for this episode, but where can people go if they want more of you?
My website is a great place. I post articles and there's contact and therapy request forms on there. And our Instagram is also a place as well. So those two are hotspots.
Awesome. Well, Julian, thanks for the work you're doing, and I appreciate it.
Aaron, really nice chatting with you today, and please stay in touch. Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you very much for tuning into that episode. And if you enjoyed it, click right here for another full-length episode of the podcast. And please don't forget to subscribe. But most importantly, above all else, please take good care of yourselves and others. And I'll see you next time. Lots of love. Cheers.